Hi, everyone. I hope you're doing well, that you're having a wonderful week. And I'm Colombe, and this is Andrea.
Yeah, hello.
Say hello.
Hello.
And we are the co-founders of Atlas, which is a global movement that is working to unite people across borders, basically to enable us to be one and to deal adequately with challenges like climate, like the fact that some multinational companies do not pay their taxes, and much more.
And this particular show is something that we started a few weeks back because we have a big dream. We have a big dream of building a global democracy, a global institution, a global country where me and you, whoever we are, we can contribute, we can potentially vote, elect people, or if the system is different, will be different, but basically express our voice on global matters, regardless of our location or whoever we are.
And so how are we doing it?
And we are doing it by starting in 2023 with a massive effort to listen to people across the planet. So a global consultation plan. We're basically gonna ask people across the planet to tell us what they think democracy should look like in 2023 and how this could work at global level. And then we're gonna use the outcome of this amazing consultation to actually campaign in front of the United Nations, so the current global governance we have, to propose our ideas. Sadly, we know the United Nations is all but democratic, so we do not expect, to be honest with you, this effort to succeed. But we hope to shake consciousness, to shake consciousness, to bring people together, to build a movement around this vision and these values. And after we've done that, and if the United Nations refuses, we're going to actually start building the global governance we want and we wish for.
So basically, we're completely bunkers. We're going to launch global consultations to crowdsource the vision of the world, campaign for it, and make it happen. Because, why not choose something easier?
Exactly. And the shows that we're starting doing a month ago now are basically aimed at spreading this idea, gathering feedback, and deep diving all aspects that such a global institution will have to deal with. So from how to revolutionize a political system to the history of institution and so on and so forth.
Exactly. And we use the live stream to kind of, do our research, bounce ideas on what a global governance, what democracy can look like, learn from our enemies, so looking at how countries were created, learn from current global institutions and their mistakes, and exchange with you. So we've had so many pushbacks, ideas, and feedbacks in those shows already. And that's what we want. So please comment, send us your ideas, our email, everywhere on those channels and so on. And let's just chat and discover together what is wrong with the global system. And today, for once, is actually a very hopeful broadcast.
Is it?
So Andrea or I prepare each broadcast. We don't do it simultaneously because otherwise it would be very boring and a waste of time. And this week, we're talking about revolutions and what we can learn from them. So on Monday, we talked about the news. So we talked about China and Iran. And yesterday, we talked about past historical struggles and what we can learn from them. So we looked at what makes people uncomfortable in the midst of a revolution. We looked at the anti-apartheid movement, the suffragettes movements, and so on. And today, I wanted to take something more recent, which is the sunflower movement in Taiwan. And I find it very, very hopeful. So that's why I'm saying it's a bit of a more hopeful broadcast. And we'll look at how Taiwan was shaped, how a peaceful civil society movement managed to create radical change when it comes to democracy, and what we can all learn from it. So pretty cool, no?
It is very, very cool. And it's also perfect because in January, Colombe and I will actually travel to Taiwan and hold the first leg of the consultations there. We're already working with local partners to organize the events, and it's going to be an exciting times.
Exactly. So before we get started, Andrea, if I say Taiwan, what do you say?
So what people normally say is they wonder what Taiwan is, if it's part of China or not. And that's very sad because it's not part of China. It's a country in itself. And people also wonder sometimes whether it's a democracy or not. And actually Taiwan is a little island, not so little, it's an island in the Pacific that break away from China decades ago. It's a very thriving democracy. It's a place where democracy is being reinvented every day.
Don't spoil my broadcast. So if I say Taiwan, it's a country, it's in the Pacific. What else? What are other facts that you know about it?
Bubble tea.
Hot pot.
So I know they have very good food. I know that
It's supposed to be considered like the best food in the world.
very true. I know they're very important in a microchip development, if I remember correctly. They do a lot of stuff that stay in our computers, and without them, would be fucked in that sense. I also know that they do not sit at the UN because of
They
China.
no longer sit at
They
the UN.
no longer sit at the UN because of China. I know that sometimes they pop up quite often in news because they are at risk of invasion from China. And what else do I know? I mean,
It's
I know
a big economy.
it's a big economy. Is I think the 20th or 21st economy in the world. It has a sizable population, more than 20 million people. I mean, I know other stuff because of our work, but these are the things that, some of this thing I knew also before.
Okay. I'm trying to find an exact date, but basically Taiwan no longer sits at the UN. Instead, it used to be recognized, the government of Taiwan, as the Republic of China, but then got removed when China gained in economic muscles. Let me tell you a bit more about Taiwan and why I think it's relevant beyond the Sunflower Movement. So Taiwan is a thriving economy and a thriving democracy. It's the 11th strongest democracy in the world. To put it in perspective, the UK, where we are sitting right now, is 16th, I think, according to the Economics Index, which is widely regarded as a very good index on democracy. So it's a thriving democracy, despite the fact that it's a very young one, because it used to be a military dictatorship until 1989. So it's very, very recent, the transition. And in such a short period of time, they managed to create an incredibly strong democratic practice and life. And it has a lot of really cool things that we can learn from. And we won't deep dive into all of them today. I'm going to post in a second, or Andrea, maybe you can post the link of the video we did. I just posted it on Twitter on Taiwan's democracy and its really cool aspects.
Going for it.
But I think there's a few interesting elements on why Taiwan is key and what we're missing out. So number one, Taiwan managed to deal with the pandemic very, very well. And that's because it had to deal with pandemics in the past. So it had some partnerships in place with pharmaceutical companies. It reacted in a very open manner. And as a result, citizens trusted it and so on. And so it had few cases and few deaths. And this without too many civil liberties rolling back, unlike in many cities, in many countries. However, and from the beginning, it knew how to deal with the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
However, it does not sit at the UN. It does not sit at the World Health Organization. And at the World Health Organization, China has a huge amount of power, a huge amount. It lobbies a lot of countries. There's questions as to the WHO's chief Tedros' independence when it comes to China and so on. So from the beginning of the pandemic, there was a hashtag going around, which was Taiwan can help. Because Taiwan can help. Taiwan knows how to deal with this type of events and knows how to solve them.
Yeah.
However, we did not consider Taiwan's help. That's because, again, there was strong lobbying from China. And that's a huge, huge mess and a huge, huge shame. And so that's one of the things I wanted to mention on why we should consider China and Taiwan. And another one is on democracy. So we're going to talk about it more now in the context of the Sunflower Movement. But Taiwan has a very strong democratic backbone. And that's because not only, and it's very impressive, because normally if you look at a lot of examples, when you have a threat to your security like China is doing to Taiwan, in addition to having a recent managing, Omi's Coffee saying, actually, Taiwan helped with information about pandemic to Czech Republic in January. Yes, good. Taiwan helped a lot of countries, but it was not admitted at the World Health Organization to share its knowledge with everyone.
Yeah, I'm posting the link to the video.
And I wanted to say, Taiwan, so it had a recent democratic transition. In addition to it, it had the threat of security of China and so on. So normally this leads actually to countries becoming more authoritarian and cracking down on civil liberties when you see that across the world. But Taiwan went the other way. It opened up. And we're going to look at the role of the Sunflower Movement in it. But I found it very beautiful because Taiwan today is a thriving democracy with a lot of digital tools. When democracy is in crisis in a lot of places across the world, when we see established democracies rolling back, looking at newer and more innovative models of democracy is a great way of actually solving the issues all the more traditional democracies have today. It's a great way of finding ways around the issue, but it's not what we're doing. We're not learning from Taiwan's best practices. And there are a lot of best practices across the world. I'm just speaking on Taiwan.
Okay.
Before I jump into it, do you want to tell me what you know about the sunflower movement?
So I know what I remember I researched back then when we produced this video. I remember it was a revolution done by some students because of the lack of democracy, of transparency, of the regime back then. I suppose it was either at the end of the 90s or in the early 2000s. I don't remember exactly. You tell us. And I know that it was a very successful. Much later. So actually 2000 and something. And I know, so it was actually Taiwan was already a democracy, and then but things were not going well. And so there was this uprising of students. They basically demanded more transparency, more inclusion. They actually went to occupy parliament. And instead of cracking down on them or ignoring their demands, if I remember correctly, the government actually listened to them and started working with them to solve the democratic gap in Taiwan.
Yeah, more or less. But it's good. You have a good knowledge of it. So again, recent transition. The martial law was in place in Taiwan until 1987. The first direct presidential elections were held in 1996, right? So from 1996 to today, it's a very short period of time. Yeah. Yet it's the 11th best democracy in the world today. So it's one of the youngest and strongest democracies. As you said, there was back in 2014, so not early 2000s, the sunflower movement that arose. And it was due to the fact that students, but also civil society and hackers were fed up by the inabilities of the ruling party to listen to the needs of people. And they were very, very worried about a new trade bill that the government was going to pass with China that was looking like it would put into danger Taiwan's independence.
Okay.
And as a result, there's this movement that started called the sunflower. I can tell you in a second. I just need to look it up. And why it's called the sunflower movement. But what
name here go down. Down. Refer to the use of some flowers by the protester, a symbol of hope. So it was a symbol of hope.
So it started, the movement went on for quite a few weeks, from March to April 2014, again, against frustration with the government, what they perceived as weakness towards China and so on. They occupied the legislative chamber. They occupied the executive bureau and were evicted, and there were attempts of negotiation. So the government didn't necessarily go to them directly. The government actually at first was like, oh, we'll review the trade agreement line by line with the committee, whatever, and then try to negotiate. At the end, had to accept the demands of the sunflower movement. What came out of it, indeed, is a lot of youth and civil society, especially civil society hackers, came out of it as emerging leaders. It kind of reinvigorated Taiwan's civil society.
Question here. Is there a reason why hackers were at a prominent role, or it just happened? Because there's a lot of digital...
I really don't know. I think a lot of civil society that were involved were focused as well on hacking. So we're going to talk about GovZero right now. Mm-hmm. But I think it's just, it happened. You had a lot of students overall.
Okay, perfect.
So the deal with China, by the way, was derailed. But the government was like, okay, clearly there's a wider issue. More political forces were created, more people went to vote, and so on. And so it reached out to GovZero, which is a group of civic hackers behind some of the protests, and asked for help. And this for me is when history was made in Taiwan. Because instead of just cracking down, they were like, okay, let's actually try to work somehow with people that have MLS. And I think this is very rare in a lot of our countries. Do you remember in Italy any moment where this happened?
I mean, no, there was a party. The 5 Star Movement was an expression of a similar malaise, so the fact that people didn't feel connected. And it had a lot of digital roots as well. But instead of being a unifying force, has been a very divisive one.
And it's not like the government reached out to it and was like...
No, they won election.
Okay, so we see that it's quite unique as a movement. Mm-hmm. And then basically some of the leaders, including, for example, Audrey Tang, who's a member of the protest and who's now the digital minister of Taiwan, started working with the government. We actually have a long interview of Audrey Tang that we can post as well on YouTube and on Twitch, detailing her path. So she was explaining that basically she joined more or less as an intern, an almost unpaid intern, and made her way up to being the youngest ever minister with that portfolio, and then basically working on digital democracy across Taiwan.
Yeah, I'm gonna find the interview and post it while you carry on.
Beautiful. And slowly but surely, democracy in Taiwan modernized. So, for example, they started a process, an open process called V-Taiwan, that gamifies consensus building on very hard or key issues by pushing participants to come up with very nuanced statements that most people could get behind. So it leverages both online and offline participation on topics like the legalization of Uber. So, for example, for the legalization of Uber, they managed to create this process online, offline using V-Taiwan, and to find a consensus among, I think it was company like insurances, Ubers, unions of taxis, passengers, and so on.
Something that not many countries have done so far.
I think Italy is still struggling with it, right?
Italy doesn't have Uber, incredibly enough.
Exactly. And a lot of places you struggle with this. I think there were a few notable other examples. I can tell you that they dealt with like the sale of online alcohol this way and so on. But for example, for COVID-19 taste and trace efforts, there was actually a high trust in the governments with people's data because they were very open and involved a lot of civil society as well in it. Something else that I found really cool is you had presidential debates and you had high school students that were fact-checking live what was being said.
Incredible.
So you have like a super high level of participation. And I'm talking about a lot of different stuff, but the V-Taiwan process, I think is incredible. We've actually inspired ourselves of this process for our consultations that we'll be running. And I think it's really cool to see. And I think it shows a big kind of response of the government towards citizens' needs. So it doesn't assume that everyone has access to the internet or to those tools at all. For example, it has hotlines where you can participate and so on.
So far, V-Taiwan seems like an amazing idea. And I remember like looking into it is really effective. It's not only, a lot of like nice words and nice, intentions, but actually it has solved massive problems. I mean, the introduction of Uber is just an example, but basically it's a classic example of a massive interest group that want to stifle innovation. And this happened in many different fields. I mean, this is just one that we know very well, but it happens in industry, in medical things. So there are always interests fighting against changing the status quo. And normally who misses out is the population at large, because obviously innovation is normally very good. And in this case, they managed to do it in a way that made everyone enough happy to accept it. And in many other countries, many other contexts, this doesn't happen. I mean, I could find countless examples of why interest groups blocking other things. For example, in the US, the fact that there is no healthcare is because those that can afford it are trying to block the watering down, what they call, of health service for everyone. So it's a clear example, national interest group trumping public interest.
No, it's really, and it's really cool. And they managed to actually gamify consensus again. So in the moment of deep polarization across the world, they managed to push for very detailed statements that the most, and it's not the tyranny of the majority, right? It's like at first they map different opinions, an opinions group, and then the majority of all opinions, so it's not in terms of numbers of participants, but of opinions, should get behind it.
Yeah.
And I find it very cool as an approach.
It's very intelligent done.
Which is very cool. Thank you for the offer of promotion, but we're not interested. We're going to go for organic growth. So I think it's quite beautiful. And I think it shows, so there's a lot of intellectual debate as to whether the Stand Power movement was successful. For me, it is a revolution. It is a cultural and democratic revolution. Institutions are changed as a result. And there's people coming out in protest against the status quo that no longer works for them. Against a fear of a restriction on freedom. And then it leads actually to people being able to come together and build new institutions. And I think it worked to a great extent. You have more innovative digital practices now in Taiwan than ever before.
That is true. And we all have a lot to learn from them, I guess. So what are we going to do in Taiwan, Colomb? Can we repeat this? I think it's going to be very important.
Yeah, go for it.
So for all of you following us and supporting the democracy of Taiwan, or the idea of democracy in Taiwan, because let's remember, Taiwan is really, really at the forefront of the democratic struggle. Is at risk of being always at risk of being absorbed by China, sadly, attacked and invaded. So we need to keep the hope high and keep on supporting. And so this is why in January, Colomb and I will go there, meet with some of our members and with some local partners, and start our democratic consultation from the place where democracy is most at peril and most innovative. So these two amazing facts, one is amazing, the other one is not amazing. These two factors combined together make Taiwan a very interesting place for a global democracy. And I think the right way to start this conversation.
Completely agree with you. So if you are in Taiwan, if you know of organizations that might be interested in hosting the consultations with us and so on, please send it our way. And if you know of other revolutions that led to positive change and have ideas of how we can use people power to create a global governance, send it our way. If you want to volunteer, it's www.atlasmovement.org.
Before Colomb chokes herself. And for any help, donation, participation idea, you find us online or on social media. And really, really, we need your help. So as Taiwan's example showed, the more, the merrier. If we really bring together brains and hopes from all over the planet, we can do incredible things. They built an incredible democracy in 25 years. So think about what we can do together in 50. So please contribute if you can.
And have a wonderful day. Bye.